Welcome to Lecture 10 of Mind and Reality. Today we start a new topic, action. Here's an example from real life. This is a true story actually. So I'm cycling to the lecture. I always like to cycle to the lecture. I'm cycling along and you see I'm a very attentive cyclist, very careful cyclist. I'm always looking where I'm going. Better watch out here actually, tricky bit. Now, I'm always looking where I'm going. And I'm cycling along, looking where I'm going. I'm coming up to a roundabout outside campus, and there's another car coming. And what ought to happen here is that the car stops and lets me go past. But it's actually one of those big Land Rover things. They weigh about 2 tons. They're driven by lovely people, care deeply about the environment. But if you're a cyclist, you may have noticed that those cars, they're pretty dangerous for cyclists. They're not always driven by people who really seem to care about missing you enough. So what I think to myself is, is that car going to stop? And now I've got a dilemma. You see, I want to get to the lecture quickly. I'm excited. I don't want to be late. On the other hand, I don't want to give the driver the inconvenience of peeling bits of my dead body off the surface of her nice car. It's a shiny car. What do? I'll tell you. I compromise. I cover the brakes. I'm ready to stop, but I'm not actually stopping yet. Now, I got one thing right and one thing wrong. I was right that the driver's paying no attention whatsoever. In fact, probably on the phone. But I was wrong about the speed. You see, the driver's going about 2 or 3 times as fast as I anticipated. So now I pull on the brakes as hard as I have ever done that. Whew, I am in so much fear. And I'm stopping, like screeching across this roundabout. I stop about this much from your window. Fun fact, the driver's probably one of my colleagues at the University of Warwick. You may even get around to watching this video eventually, in which you're the star. So hi there. If you see me on campus, do say hello, because your face is now imprinted into my memory. Do you know why? As you drove past me, you did exactly what the highway code says. You didn't slow down, but you did turn to me and give me a little apologetic smile as you finally realised what had happened. You saw me sort of, accelerating towards your window. The apologetic smile, thank you for that. Very good. See you later. Anyway, and I thought to myself, Steve, that's so lucky what happened to you this morning, because that's actually the perfect illustration for your lecture on action. See, what we've got is a distinction between things that you did, you nearly killed me, and things that merely happened to you, you starred in my lecture. And you also gave me the perfect example, 2 things that merely happened to you. And that's just perfect for our next topic, which is action. And this topic is, like all topics, associated with a question. In this case, the question is, what is the mark that distinguishes action? Now, just as we're doing with all of our 7 topics, we're going to take this question to be what we discuss in the lectures, what you write about for the seminars, and it's also the thing that will be in your assessments, and thinly disguised, it will be in the exam as well. So the one question is doing an awful lot of work for us. I do this because I don't like lots of surprises, and I don't think that in an exam I really want to measure how quickly you can think. What I want to measure is how deeply you can think, and so I'm already telling you, this essentially is the question that we'll be looking at in the lectures, in the seminars, in the writing that you do, in the exam that's set, one way or another. This is the question. Now you're faced with this question, gosh, what's the mark that distinguishes actions? And then you think, well, the first thing to ask here is, distinguishes from what? What are we distinguishing the actions from? And the answer to that question is suggested by Harry Frankfurt, who says, the problem of action is to explicate the contrast between what an agent does and things that merely happen to him. So earlier in the story about the cycle, true story, there were a lot of things that were happening to me and very few things that I was actually doing. The wind, the other car, all the rest of it, very little that I was doing. Essentially, I was doing a very little bit of pedalling and the occasional hard press of the brakes and a bit of balancing, of course, and that was it. But lots of things were happening to me. Lots of the events there were making up my life and rather pleasant experiences up until the end. Now, very good. So we want to contrast things that an agent does from things that merely happen to her. Oh, that reminds me. So Frankfurt says him, but of course Frankfurt was writing in the 70s. You're not writing in the 70s, and so you shouldn't do that. But of course we'll leave Frankfurt well alone there. So our question is very simple. What is the mark that distinguishes actions? What are we distinguishing them from? Things which merely happen to an agent. The contrast between the balancing that I'm doing as my bicycle is moving along and the impact that the car has as it scrunches into me. So there's an event which involves me, the scrunching of the sleeve. That's not one of the actions that I perform. Marvellous, very good. Okay, Steve, what's your plan? I'm glad you asked, that's a good question. My plan is very simple. We are going to first of all introduce the standard story, which is often called a causal theory of action. I put that in quotes here because I don't actually think it is a theory. You see, as philosophers we use words like theory, paradox, truth and the rest. They should really mean something, and we have pretty clear ideas about what theories are, and philosophers generally are not in the business of constructing theories. They use that term only to make what they're doing seem more glamorous. So we're going to introduce the standard story that you will see elsewhere in the literature referred to as the causal theory. And then, when we've got that picture in view, we'll look at Frankfurt's objections to the standard story. So Frankfurt for us in this section is a key philosopher, really for two reasons. One is that he's a philosopher very unlike Dretske. Dretske is master of distinction, super sharp. Frankfurt has lots of interesting, provocative ideas, but my sense is that Frankfurt's pretty clueless about what the significance of his ideas actually are. He and Dretske are really poles apart. They're both brilliant philosophers, but they're brilliant in entirely different ways. So that's interesting. The other reason we're studying Frankfurt is because he wrote a paper on this, which is just 6 pages long, and I thought that would also make us more interested in reading Frankfurt than reading people who've written 20 or 30 pages. Serious point. All of that reading involves effort. Effort is pain, and we prefer to maximise the rewards that we get for the pain that we undergo. But before we do any of that, we need a preliminary. The preliminary of 3 basic principles on action in order for us to have a kind of common basis for discussion. So let's go and check out those 3 principles right away.